So welcome, Ted.
So
Lovely
much
to
for
see
having me.
you.
Very glad to see you as well, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here and having some in-depth time with these things we're going to be talking about. So thank you so much. Honored to be here.
Fabulous. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you for taking the time out. Before we dive into everything teaching, I wonder if you could tell the listeners a bit about your background in mindfulness and meditation.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So what I started in the Zen tradition in the 80s and did my first little Dharma talk there. And after about a decade in the Zen tradition, also started to read more and practice in the Theravada tradition and have stayed with both of those through to the present. And somewhere along the line, encountered MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. And that was really what I've been looking for, a way in which this practice is of value to me in my contemporary life as a science-minded Midwestern American, and recognizing that I have a different cultural worldview than what traditions may have. And so really went into that, eventually becoming a teacher and even working at UMass, the Center for Mindfulness, for several years. And that brings us to the present, where I now have my fingers in a lot of different pies across the world. I am the current chair of the board for the Mindfulness Network in the UK. I'm the director of credentialing for the Mindfulness Council of Canada. Just this morning, I saw that we are being reviewed. I'm part of a co-author of a paper coming out and mindfulness that's been submitted to, and I'm also a peer reviewer for the journal Mindfulness. Teach about burnout prevention and recovery, as well as mindfulness, whether it's MBSR or my own programs. And most of my time these days is spent in supervision and mentoring, and in particular in bringing mindfulness into workplaces. So that's the elevator story in a very tall building.
Wow, you've got a lot going on. And I wonder what the essence of what you do is from your point of view. Is it around education? Is it a teacher education? Is it something else?
It's tough to encapsulate that because as you're speaking, there's a lot of different things. I'd say there are a few different, very brightly colored threads in that tapestry. One is teacher training. That is something that I do internationally. But more broadly, and I'd say at the taproot of all of this, is how to support the field of mindfulness. Maintaining high integrity and rigor around what it is that we do. And that's from putting a spotlight onto the voices and faces of others in the field and connecting people, and especially researchers and new researchers who are just so amazing in the way that they think. So really, it's just supporting the field of mindfulness so that it can go on and continue to help people in the wonderful ways in which it has for thousands of years, but
Mhm.
in our contemporary society.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. I wonder if we could go further back and just find out about your journey into meditation in the first instance and what was going on and what brought you to, you mentioned Zen originally. I wonder if you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question because it kind of goes to the heart of, I think, what many people run into is there is some difficulty, some challenge in their life. For me, back then, it was noticing I was having a very hard time focusing. And a friend had recommended that they'd heard meditation was good for that kind of thing. And back then, there wasn't quite as much of the prevalence of secular programs. So I went to the local Zen center, the Minnesota Zen Meditation Center on Lake Calhoun in Minneapolis. And this was for just a weekend practice. It's a small group, maybe 8 people showed up for this. And Dokai Georgeson was the person who led that meditation. And in Zen, it's done a little differently than people may think of it now as, well, you have to have a recording and guide a meditation. That's not how we did it then. It was hear the instructions, and then we're going to sit in silence for about 10 minutes. And that was the hardest 10 minutes of my life because I had I'd never looked inwards, and my mind was all over the place. And that made it very, very clear why I couldn't focus, and was amazed at how ignorant I was of my own mind's activities because I'd never taken a look. And that led me to a path of, well, this is something I can do something about and make a change with. And then many, many things over the years came up out of that. But that main thing was that first very, very difficult
Mhm.
experience of taking a look inside my own mind.
Mhm. I wonder if you could now just maybe just define how you see mindfulness, how you see meditation. Do you have a way in which you talk about that?
Actually, a lot of different ways that I talk about that, depending on who I'm speaking with and what the context is. Because I do have conversations still in traditional settings, and that brings with it a particular framework and structure of how we might view the practices that we're doing. When I'm working with an audience that's more open, and I mean open as like they're not coming from a particular ideological stance, it's the general public. What I will tend to do is give an outline of the IAA model of what we mean by mindfulness and those particular trainings that I may be giving. So, intention, attention, and attitude, and how those all work together. But then I'll sum it up with something that came out of an interview I did several years ago when I was asked, "What does mindfulness mean to you?" Which was a brilliant question because I'd never really thought of it in that way. And the need to translate it into, well, what does it mean specifically to me? If I let go of all the research definitions and traditional definitions and all of that, what is that for me? And what came up was a phrase, showing up with care. And that really has stayed with me because there's presence involved. It is active. You are showing up. It's something that you are and do. It's a wave and a particle. It's both of those. And then with the word care, I mean that in a couple of different ways. Care as in the delicacy, the gentleness of that presence, but also the heartfulness, the caring nature of showing up as well. So for me, showing up with care does a really nice job of encapsulating all of that.
Thank you. I'd love to hear about how you first got into teaching in this field. If you'd say a few words about that.
Yeah, there are a couple different ways. There was that first Dharma talk in the 90s, and that led to conversations more in Theravada settings than others. And at some point along the line, I had decided to start an audio podcast when podcasts were relatively new. About 18 years ago this month, as of this recording in May of 2026, I started the Secular Buddhist podcast. And that was one of the few Buddhist podcasts out there that was looking at what does the sasana, this particular tradition setting, have to say about what we're doing and how we're living today with a different cultural context, different time, different needs, different views. What is that like? And started that right away as an interview format. So much of what influenced how I would eventually come to teach has come from the guests over the years. And I've since retired that podcast to move on to other podcasts. And the main way in which that has informed how I teach is the criticality, not just a nice to have, but the criticality
Mhm.
of really listening to the people that you are working with, that you are teaching, to really understand what their needs are. Because I would bring with it my own, here's what it is, and this is right. This is what works no matter what. And that has been shown again and again to not be entirely accurate. And that people's individual experiences, life trajectories, medical conditions, loves and concerns, and all the rest of it can make a very big difference in what is most helpful to them. So I always try to bring into that whatever the unique circumstances are for those individuals. And of course, that's challenging when you have a very large class. I teach programs that routinely have hundreds of people live in those sessions at the same time.
Mhm.
They are designed for very large groups and much easier to do when I'm doing one-on-one mentoring. But that's a whole other conversation.
Okay, maybe we can touch on some of that a little bit later on. You've mentioned MBSR, of course, and secular Buddhism. Is there something about the secular aspect that has been really important for you? You've touched on that, but wonder if there's more
Yeah.
you could say about why it's important and what the difference is between that and maybe previous experiences.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing for people to understand is that this use of the word secular is not in any way to take away from what is spiritually or religiously meaningful to people. It is simply another way in which people find meaning in their lives. To me, that is the underlying capacity of what it is we're striving for, whether we're in a religious setting or a secular setting. So it's not being set in opposition to, it's another
Yes.
area within an environment. It's another star in the constellation, if you will. So to me, secularity is one that is focused, and credit to Stephen Batchelor around the formulating of this, is around this lifetime. That while there may be, if one has a belief in again becoming punya bhava, of a cycling of rebirths, that's fine. My focus is on this one because this one I know is here and now. And if I'm doing things that are of benefit to others and self, the rest will play out as it would play out if there is rebirth. That's fine. But I don't need to worry about that. It's taken care of based on what I'm doing here and now. So secularity is not so much about or opposed to religion. It's not that at all. I am trained in tradition that is still very much a part of my life, of those structures and those spaces, because they are so helpful and meaningful, as is secularity, as is science, as is the natural world, as is my pets and loved ones and family and all the rest of it. That's all included within that idea of secularity. And one of the benefits of that is it also opens up programs like MBSR, MBCT, others like that, to others, whatever their particular spiritual views happen to be. One of the most rewarding things for me is at the end of a course, someone who has been a little concerned about this secular program may be in conflict with their religious views. And we've had discussions about that beforehand, so they're well aware and go into it with open eyes, fully informed. At the end of it, saying, this has brought me more closely to my spiritual practices. And even
Mm,
though I may have a very different view on what those are, that's incredibly rewarding because it is what is most meaningful to them. And to me, that's a tremendous benefit to having secular programs.
yeah, really interesting response. Thank you. I wonder if there is a key influence on your path as a teacher over this period of time.
Several, it's hard to nail down one.
Mm,
There's shared attitudes and views. It's Stephen Batchelor, of course. And as far as teachers, Bhante Gunaratana, Bhante Ji here in the US, has been a wonderful teacher over the years. I've been on many retreats at Bhavana Society with him. And just reading some of the writings that he did decades ago, long before mindfulness in plain English, but to the people who were deeply embedded in Theravada as scholars in this, his mind is amazing and brilliant, and his heart is just limitless. So Bhanteji is another. And then just a wonderful approach of my old boss at the Center for Mindfulness, Saki Santorelli. Saki's way of doing guided practices, it's hard to discern whether it heavily influenced how I guided practices or whether this was just consistent with how I was already doing them. I don't know, but it's always just a great delight to be with him and to have learned from him, and especially in how he was with his genuine care for the people who worked at the center for years. So those are a few off the top of my head.
yeah, great. And when you look at teaching, how would you describe your general approach? Maybe in person, first of all, if there's anything additional you want to see it online, but what's that in person TED like, if you like?
Yeah. Well, hopefully as close to what you're getting here, as genuine as I can be. And when wearing that hat of being a teacher, modeling the presence that I hope is something that their mirror neurons will pick up on or whatever it happens to be inspired by. I'd say the way in which that shows up the most is, and this is a methodology I will often use in teaching, is asking questions. And not just, a yes, no kind of closed question, but what is this like for you? What are you noticing right now? That instead of it being me teaching what Ted is experiencing in this moment or what you should be feeling or should be experiencing, it's encouraging the curiosity of that person, whatever it is they are encountering. Whether that's what does it feel like when you're really listened to and someone's paying attention? What's that like? Hearing what that's like. And then what is it like when you're not listened to? And how does that feel? And seeing the different kinds of responses that may come up, whether we're in person or online, whatever that happens to be, having people get a little curious about their own experience because it's been so transformative to me over the years. And when I am supervising new teachers of MBS, one of the things that I try to be very clear with them is I don't want you to teach how I teach. I want you to teach how you're going to teach. Bring in that unique, special you that I could never do, but you can. I also have developed my own programs. So things like the burnout course or the mindfulness foundations, which is not based on MBSR. It has a totally different structure, or the mindfulness in the workplace course. And again, totally different structure with a very different purpose. We don't actually do mindfulness in that because you're already a mindfulness teacher. Bringing that into a context and understanding teaching mindfulness in a church and doing a full course there might be different than just doing a few drop-ins at a law firm. One thing that I do try to be aware of and bring into whatever it is that I'm teaching is helping the people, first off, just notice how they're doing. And this came out of the burnout course when so many people, typically 3 or 4 weeks in, would say, I had no idea I was burned out. I was just taking this because I was curious about it. And I'm recognizing how burned out I am because I didn't know. Cue back to full circle, me not knowing why I was so distracted. I couldn't focus on anything. It was
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So
Mm.
first learning, how are you? How do you know how you're doing? Learning about that to be able to get a sense of what's the internal weather pattern like, and then learning how to take care of yourself within whatever that weather pattern may be. Whether it's, yeah, I can do some practice now, or now's maybe not the best time. I can come back to it later. And then getting into, okay, and now we're going to do some mindfulness practices. But first learning to know how you're doing and then take care of yourself and then getting into practices, which is part of trauma sensitive mindfulness. It's not that you have to have a history of trauma for that to be helpful. Everyone runs into difficulties now and then.
Mhm. Mhm.
This can be very helpful and is part of safeguarding the participants in programs.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of angles I'd like to go down here, but I think the first one is you've mentioned burnout a few times, and I just wondering how you came to that topic and that theme in your work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because this ties to the workplace program as well. So often when people are coming to mindfulness for some reason, there's an existing coping mechanism which may not be cutting it anymore, might not be enough, or just running into just too much difficulties. For many people, that was coming from where most of their waking hours are spent, which is in the workplace. And so learning and doing a little checking on, well, okay, why are people having so many difficulties? Like there's this thing called burnout. And being a good research minded science geek, I decided to do some checking and happily discovered that like mindfulness has about 4 decades of research behind it. So does burnout. And it's entirely separate body of research. And going through that and learning about it from the lens of a mindfulness professional, seeing so many of the ties there, and also noticing some of the gaps that exist and why wellness programs or just mindfulness programs don't actually help and can make things worse is because they don't target the actual causes and conditions of burnout. They deal with the symptoms of it. So this is one of the main paradigm shifts in the program is people come to it thinking, this will help me be more calm, more stable. Yes, mindfulness is included and it does help in that way. And the real value of mindfulness, as far as burnout is concerned, is being able to discern what some of those causes and conditions are and changing them, having choice about what we do to not just be okay with being in a toxic environment. But how do we change that environment and make it the kind of place where we would want to work? That's really an underpinning of that program.
Yeah. Very worthy work. And I wonder what you've noticed over the years working with organizations in terms of the impact the programs have had in a positive sense, but also have you come up against some resistance from organizational leaders, for example?
Yeah, let's talk about benefits to this at first is that I would do pre and post measurements of how are people doing. Now, there are really good instruments like the Mindfulness Attention Awareness Scale, MOS, and FFMQ, 5-Facet Mindfulness Questionnaire. I tend not to use MOS because it focuses on one thing, your ability to focus. And while that's great, that I don't really care if you can count to 10 while meditating on your breath. It doesn't matter to me. What I do care about is how are you doing? Are you able to more adequately address the needs that you're running into? This is because I learned how to sit by counting to 10 with one with each breath. And I eventually realized I was counting really well, but my mind was still going. Counting had become this automatic thing that was running in the background while I was still mind wandering. So don't use that one as a match. Did do FFMQ that showed significant improvements, but also did DOS-21, Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Scale. And that also showed significant results and changes. So for those who might not be familiar with those scales, it's essentially, are you feeling better after going through a program? And those changes for those who are in the most severe area were significant. And what I found really interesting is that their change would be a small percentage, maybe 5% difference pre and post. People who were saying in the open comments about what else would you like to share would say, this is life-changing. This made a huge difference in my life. And so I've been rethinking a little bit the idea that you have to have an 80% change from one to the next. Actually, you don't. A 2 to 5% change can be incredibly transformative for someone. I don't know if you consider using a different simile that we are only 2% different than chimpanzees genetically. That 2% is huge. So the small percentage points can make a very big difference. And the one other instrument that I used for a while for the burnout course in particular was the Maslach Burnout Inventory, the MBI. And that again showed tremendous changes in the different domains of burnout because burnout is not just one thing. So that's did this make a difference? And it did. And I had colleagues within my own team at the end of the class said, by the way, I know this wasn't on the questionnaire, but I was going to resign. And I didn't because you gave me the tools I needed to be able to keep going. So, and I heard that from a lot of different people too. I didn't include that as a question in the questionnaire. So the other piece that you'd asked is there's also some resistance to this. Yes, there is. It's interesting because on the business side of it, the people who would often say, oh, no, we don't want to offer this to human resources. They won't want this. This isn't the kind of thing they're interested in. That was counter to what we were actually hearing, that human resources departments were the ones who really, really wanted this because they have yearly employee surveys. Those surveys were showing things were not going well at all. Often a challenge would be from leaders in a given business space who would have the impression that we're going to look at the causes and conditions, and that means we have to change our entire business model. That's not what it means. What it does mean is that the ways to change those conditions, there are 3 different ways in which we can do that that don't involve changing your entire business model.
Mhm.
First off, that people have challenging work, not overwhelming work. People like having challenging work. This came through very clearly in the pre and post interviews and in conversations during class that nobody woke up and said, I want to be a couch potato and not doing anything. Most people want to have challenging work that's interesting to them. The second is that they get to work with others, that they're not isolated and feeling like they're the only person who's encountering these difficulties, whatever it happens to be. So partnering with others, having challenging work, and that challenging work can be, how do we change the conditions that are causing burnout? What do we
Mhm.
do to make things better for us? And then that third condition is being able to see that you've made a difference. So many of us work on these things and we don't get to see the benefits that are happening to that. So those 3 together, all of them counter burnout on their own, but especially when they're focused on changing the conditions around burnout. So many leaders may not recognize that having a workplace in which the employees, the staff, the contractors, yourself are all enthusiastically engaged
Mhm.
is a differentiator that can
Yeah, yeah.
directly impact the bottom line, which is what executives are typically most concerned about. There's research that shows that helps your bottom line, doesn't take away from it, it helps it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. That was a nice trajectory around burnout and the workplace. I'd like to bring you back to yourself as a teacher, and I wonder if you could say a little bit about how you motivate yourself as a teacher, how you develop your own practice, whatever it is that you
Yeah.
do to keep yourself informed, embodied as a practitioner, etc.
I'm very fortunate in that with podcasting, as you're encountering as well, I get to speak with amazing people. As of this recording, it's over 600 interviews over the years,
Mm.
and everyone has brought some insight and knowledge. Ways to keep myself motivated include having conversations like this and learning from the people who come on as guests is incredibly encouraging. I look forward to each and every conversation because I learn something new every time. So there's that. I am posting almost every day on what the research is showing around mindfulness, burnout, topics like that. And it's encouraging because it really validates what we were just talking about in the mindfulness sphere and showing people how they're doing and how to adjust as they need to and make choices around these things. That again, it's validating. It wasn't so much I researched this, it's during the course that is what surfaced every single time was these same needs that the participants were sharing about them. And that's influenced my own practice because there's always something new for me to really investigate and explore in my own daily practice. And being able to look more deeply into some aspect of communication or presence or insight or focus or a body scan or whatever that I hadn't considered or run across before. So that always keeps me very interested. There is also I will admit, I think many teachers may admit this, is before a class, particularly a longer class, there's uh, a bit of a dread, a bit of, oh gosh, it's going to be the next couple hours. And because it is work to maintain that space and hold a class and find that balance between teaching and prompting curiosity and learning and support and all, there's so much that it can be quite exhausting while also being exhilarating. And yet by the end of class, I'm all smiles. I feel light. I feel energized because again, the participants there have taught me something new and
Mhm.
they're getting something out of it because each one of them has brought in an entire lifetime of experience that I've never
Mhm.
had. And I get to have that insight to what it's like from that perspective. Wow, that is
Mhm.
amazing. And so it's just humbling and honoring and fulfilling to be able to do this work. So
Yeah.
that's what keeps me going within the field.
Yeah. Wonderful. It can feel like a win-win situation in a way, can't it? Because you're practicing when you're teaching, you get so much out of it, and people get so much out of it. It's a wonderful vocation or profession, however you want to put it. Yeah, brilliant. I wonder if we could delve into the area of the goals of practice or the goals of teaching. Often people just want to maintain themselves in a much better way than they currently are. But then you have people looking for something much more like personal transformation and deep realization. And I wonder how you help facilitate that for people. I'm not saying it's always possible or always in our capabilities of doing that in all circumstances, but is there anything that you could speak to that about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a wonderful question, Michael, is this idea that people coming to a particular program might not always understand why they're there. At the beginning of an MBSR course, we'll do a pebble drop exercise. Like, oh, what brings you here? Why are you here? And here's the idea that comes to mind, the one that I've told myself that I know that may be very true. And then we ask a little more deeply. Is that pebble goes beneath the surface. What's beneath the surface? Why are you here? Really? And then exploring that together, and then asking again a third time, all the way down to the bottom. No, really, really going as deeply as you can. Why are you here? And that can bring up some things that are sometimes a little surprising, a little unknown. And then several weeks into practice, and this is an important thing, that they've been practicing on a daily basis and getting warmed up to this capacity to notice what's here, to acknowledge what's here, not just notice it and then it's gone, but acknowledge it, stay with it for a few moments so that we can choose our response to what's showing up. That discovery is interesting. It changes over time. It may be recognizing that, I thought I was here for this. We did the pebble drop and I thought I got all the way to the bottom, and this other stuff is showing up more. That's fascinating. And that's a thing to celebrate because that's growing. That's learning. That is already the increasing of the capacity to notice what's here.
Mhm,
And again, a terrific encouragement because I'm not doing their practice for them. They're doing
mhm,
it. They're
mhm,
doing the heavy lifting and work on this. And so these realizations are things to encourage is, yeah, you are in charge of this. You're able to do this yourself.
mm,
And then when it comes to those who already have been practicing maybe for decades and really have a sense of, this, that, the other thing, here's what I'm running into. For that, it's not so much a take this course. There's probably nothing brand new in that course for those that may be more mentoring. And I use mentoring as a
mm,
uniquely distinct thing from supervision, but mentoring, again, being more open-ended. It's having some agreements around the fluid nature of what we're going to be doing. That there may be some aspirations or goal setting to be done, and we revise that as time goes on and things change. We
mhm,
discover that I didn't really have to reach the eighth jhana. That wasn't actually my goal. My goal was to get a little more stability in my life is really what's more important to me. Oh, okay. And here are the resources that may help with that. And even pointing them to resources that may not be me. I may not be the best fit for them.
mhm,
And allowing that relationship to change over time. That's, I think, one of the most important ways to help support others is knowing our own limits, that we can't
mhm.
know everything. And there are others who may be better suited to be able to help someone with their needs.
The way you're talking about this reminds me of what John Kabat-Zinn said about the curriculum of MBSR. The person is the curriculum, they're their own curriculum, and you're there as a teacher to guide and help them on that path, if you like. Mhm. Super. Could we go towards talking a little bit about the values that inform your vision for practice and maybe where they come from?
It's interesting as you say this, Michael, there's the values that influence my personal practice, and then the values that influence what I do within the field of mindfulness. For my personal practice, there's the knowledge from experience that I am a work in progress, and I always will be a work in progress, and that there are always new things to do. I don't see so much a law of diminishing returns. Like, I now only have these little refinements to make in who I am. It's like, no, I still have really big, big things to shift and change. And that's where a mindfulness practice goes right to the heart of that, whether it's behavior change that I needed myself, better listening, better this, better that. The practice gets right to the heart of where is that coming from? So a value underpinning that is not just constant improvement. It's not so much that, it's being the person that I would much rather be to be worthy of the wonderful people that I have in my life. That's really the main thing. And then within the field of mindfulness, as you know very well as mindfulness professionals, the clock doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. It's not the end of the day and now we're no longer mindfulness people. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. And one of the things that I'm seeing as a challenge to the field right now in particular is, I think, an unseen habit within mindfulness organizations of competing. See people coming to programs like the workplace program with like wanting to learn about how do I advertise better to get more people in the programs that I'm teaching. And that's not a wrong thing. And it can be more than that. Can be other than just out competing the other person and getting people in your program instead of theirs. One of the things I'm really pushing for right now is that we move from this trend of competition to more collaboration. By collaboration, that we're actively supporting one another in long-term relationships. That it's not cooperation, that tends to be more short-term, but true collaboration, ongoing mutual support. And it's one of the reasons why my podcasts have always been about sharing other people's work. It's one of the reasons why my social media presence, most of that is sharing research, again, other people's work, but also reposting and showing what others are doing in the field. This is one of the things I want to challenge larger organizations in particular with is stop just posting your own stuff. Post work that is helpful to people in general and the world at large. That will help you. It's not going to water down what you do. It brings you more views and more attention, and that will include your own
Yep.
stuff. But putting a spotlight on things that are of value above and beyond what we are doing in our own little areas, that's what we really need within the field right now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. There is a creeping corporateness within mindfulness, I think, that I guess was going to be inevitable once it became more and more popular. But there's also the danger of the bigger organizations becoming overbearing, and it's very hard for other new practitioners and smaller kind of organizations to get a hold in the field, with particularly with so many people being trained, teacher
Yeah.
trained. Yeah, and competing for students. We can all help each other create a better culture. Some people might move to another organization or try different teachers out. That's fine. People come and go, but hopefully everybody's being brought up at the same time. And there's so many opportunities to work together, different types of expertise, and um, yeah, be an external tutor for somebody else, for example, or they could work for you, or you could share a retreat together. Whatever, sharing good practice. Sounds like a wonderful vision, and yeah. What would you say was the ultimate vision for you in terms of the impact of all of this mindfulness work on the world?
My expectation is that things will shift, but they tend not to shift until they get really, really bad and maybe even worse than they are right now. What I would see that mindfulness, what you and I know as mindfulness and how that can contribute, and there may be other words that are used in different contexts. So please understand those watching this, we may mean the same thing. We're just using different words for it. Is that there is an increase in the genuine care, the authentic heartfulness for others. It is not just a self-centered, narcissistic, I'm out for me, out for number one. That isn't helping. That doesn't actually help the individual either. To be honest, that is actively harmful to them over time. So seeing mindfulness that allows people to more clearly notice how they are in relation to others, and to really be able to accept things that may be more difficult for us at first blush when we learn something new that may be counter to how we've viewed the world, whether it's things like vaccinations or the earth is round, right? This was fundamental level things like that, that there can be more support for each other. Because if you're looking out for other people and they are looking out for you, that tends to work out much better. We all are supported by that.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have a view of beyond the human to the ecological and the non-human beings? Do you bring that into your practice, into your teaching somewhere?
I do very much so in my own personal life. I'm an outdoorsy guy. My degree is in biology, so evolution and the interconnectedness of things and how things change over time. I I couldn't get away from that even if I wanted to. To me, that's fascinating and energizing and brings a sense of tremendous wonder to
Mm,
every moment of encountering with the natural world. In my teaching, I am very careful around not bringing in my value perspectives to other people's lives. That's something for them to discover for themselves. What we will do is inquire within our own lives, what are you noticing? Usually that will tend to be things like, "Oh, I have an influence on the people around me." There's so much that goes into this raisin that I'm trying out in class one in MBSR, that there were people who grew this and others who delivered it. There's, wow. In Zen, the phrase 1001 details go into the single glint of a peacock's tail.
great. Lovely response. I'd like to now take you into thinking about the future. Firstly, do you think there are any misconceptions about mindfulness that need correcting, if you like, in terms of how it's conveyed in the modern world?
Yes, and gosh, we could go on about this all day. I'll try to keep myself contained. There's the people who are not involved with mindfulness, have never trained it, and have an understanding that this is Buddhism. And I'll say that when I'm teaching, and I teach in both Buddhist contexts and non-Buddhist contexts, and I keep very strong boundaries between those, is that when I'm teaching about mindfulness, it's about a human being, a human experience. It's about what are you noticing in your world with your senses, with how you are, with what's going on in your mind. That's something everyone can do because we all have that. And having being part of a panel discussion at a Christian college years and years ago in Minnesota, and many people being very interested in this and hearing that, yeah, this isn't something you have to avoid because it's not coming from your context. You're a human being. So to everyone else, let's do this. And everybody applauding, like, okay, do you feel your hands touching each other? Yes, I do. I'm like, that's mindfulness too. That's also part of this.
Hmm.
And some people were still very resistant to it. So that's one of the things is
Hmm.
the understanding of what it is that
Hmm.
mindfulness can be based on human experience, a unique human experience within a shared environment of five senses, if they're functioning, as well as thoughts, the experience of thinking. Within uh, a broader context of the profession of mindfulness is this idea that mindfulness is about becoming calm, becoming more balanced. And certainly that it is part of what usually happens with people who encounter mindfulness and practice it on an ongoing basis. What is not getting as much focus, and it's not that it's not known, it's just maybe not getting as much focus, is the discernment that grows with mindfulness. Our ability to look at things that may be unpleasant instead of our usual avoidance and suppression habits, which we may not even be aware of. I was
Mm,
not aware of in my own practice, and be able to turn towards what's here.
mm. Mhm.
So even people who are interested and may have their own seated practice might not have grappled with the, I'm still doing the bypassing thing.
Mhm.
And even seeing that just this morning as a recent criticism of well-known international teachers, that bypassing is still very much a part of what they're doing.
Mhm.
So not bypassing, but directly encountering what's here right now and not
Mhm.
turning away from that. And that doesn't mean punishing yourself with it. There's also this, how am I doing? And taking care of yourself. Sometimes taking a pause, taking a step back is the appropriate choice for that.
Mhm.
So I think those are a few of the main things, but the general idea is that mindfulness is just one thing about becoming calm. It's not.
Mhm.
And this is
Yeah.
my pushback on apps that are, oh, just, listen to our meditations. Like, nope. It's like, as you and I have spoken about, it's listening to random meditations without actual human contact, let alone trained teacher contact, is like going to the pharmacy and taking random pills off the shelf,
Mhm.
hoping that one of them might actually help you with whatever the condition you're running into is. It doesn't work so.
Yeah. Super. What emerging trends do you see happening in the field of mindfulness that you're particularly interested in, capturing your attention, you're excited about?
A few different things that there's the excited and concerned about. Both of those trends exist right now. Most excited about is how research is being done. One of the things that we in the field have needed to do is shore up and firm up our research methodologies. If we're going to analyze and look at mindfulness from a scientific lens, that brings with it certain rigors around doing good science. So, seeing studies that have more active control groups, I'm seeing more and more of those. Ones that use pre and post kinds of measurements that are not just mindfulness measurements, but other ones. What I'm very excited by seeing is that most of the information I get in my feeds, which I look at every day on mindfulness, is not coming from mindfulness professionals. It's coming from other
Mm.
disciplines who are looking at it, particularly around mental health and healthcare. To me, that's very exciting because it means we've gotten outside of the sphere of being just alternative. This is one of the concerns that I have is that mindfulness is still booked in with pseudoscience in a lot of different areas. And that makes it a bit challenging to, for example, have programs like MBSR and MBCT reimbursed as mental health interventions by insurance companies because they have particular rigors that are based on pharmacological interventions, which we in mindfulness can absolutely do, but we haven't been doing such a good job of that.
Mm.
This is
Mhm.
something that Richie Davidson mentioned years ago at one of the scientific conferences at UMass is we need to do a better job. And I'm seeing that happening. And that's one of the things I'm
Yeah.
most excited about. One of the things I'm a little concerned about, I'm seeing increased commercialization. I am particularly concerned by training programs that are I'll see a website with this program that teaches you how to do this stuff and it's fully automated and there's not a single human being that's attached to it that you can find
Mm.
anywhere.
Mm.
No contact with a person whatsoever. That's very concerning because you don't actually know what you get. And even when they do say, oh, this was developed by, for example, a program on neurodiversity. And I asked, who developed this? I'm like, so and so. Like, what's their training in neurology? I'm like, oh, they have a PhD. And I looked them up, and they do have a PhD in comparative literature. And they have no formal training whatsoever in neurodiversity. But this course was developed by them.
I assume to some extent this is linked with AI, and, do you
Yeah.
have a view on whether AI can be a help
Yes.
or a hindrance to the whole mindfulness field in some way?
Yeah, many views. I'm VP of Mental Health Innovation for Conscious Paths, which does AI stuff. So I'm hip deep in AI and regularly post on ethical AI development because much of what I'm seeing in AI development is not ethical. It does not put the person first. So I do think that AI is a tool to help prompt curiosity interest, thinking of things in ways we haven't seen before, it can be tremendously valuable there. But there are great risks with AI the way it is right now. Hallucinations can provide false information. And in research, so much research has fake research, non-existent research that it's citing to support papers that are being done. I'm also posting about that on a regular basis too. So I think AI has tremendous potential, but right now, its environmental impact is devastating to local communities. These communities do not want AI data centers that they're paying for and increased taxes that the data center people are getting a tax break. Why? There's no reason for it. And the amount of water and electricity that they are using that is resulting in increased rates for regular people. These are things that need to be addressed before the tremendous dependency in AI continues. So yes, I
Yeah.
think it can be very helpful, but there are a lot of changes that need to occur first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Just as a final question before we go to the final quick fire round, if you like. Maybe you may have touched on some of this, but if not, how do you think mindfulness teaching, mindfulness education needs to evolve over the next few decades?
Yeah, this came up in a post from about 3 weeks ago. There's an article that had been written about how the term gold standard could be kind of problematic in that it establishes something, whatever it happens to be, as being reserved from criticism, reserved from being updated, reserved from all of the things that make stuff better over time. What I'm concerned about is that right now, so much of what we do in mindfulness has been heavily influenced by the ways we've done them in traditions all the time. So, requirements around the amount of retreat time we have for our credentialing when there's no research that shows our retreat time as teachers has a direct impact on our participants. It's because we've always done it that way, and that's had a heavy influence, and it's within a structure of the longest running secular programs like MBSR and MBCT, that even things like our MBI TAC, our Mindfulness-Based Teacher Assessment Criteria, is fundamentally based on those heavyweight programs. But if you're a teacher whose all you do is facilitate drop-ins once a week, that might be a
Mm.
bit much.
Mm.
There is no program curriculum adherence domain that applies at all. So what I would like to see is more inclusive understanding of the field, that it's not just training has to be this incredibly expensive thing you do over years when you're just doing this one piece.
Mhm.
And that one piece still has aspects to it that need to be tended to, like awareness of trauma difficulties, people taking care of themselves. What are our limits? What are the cultural needs? How do we
Mm.
safeguard our participants? All of these things that didn't get much focus, even in robust, multi-year, very expensive teacher training programs. And especially the idea of having ongoing mills for teachers of a particular program when almost nobody is filling our classrooms anymore in
Mhm.
those programs. That's problematic. We're making the problem worse.
I'd love to expand further, but I'm going to take you into the final quick fire set of questions because I'm aware of time and it's been so interesting so far. But is there anything that I haven't asked that maybe I could have asked that we haven't covered?
It's a really good question. And I'd be interested to hear your answer to this as well as what do you see as one of the biggest challenges to the field right now?
Love the way you've turned that back to me. It's very, very artful. Very
Mean
artful.
trick, sorry.
It's all right. It's absolutely fine. I've said this before, but I think how it is portrayed generally in organizations, it's about this misunderstanding that you were talking about earlier, that it's sometimes presented in very superficial ways. I don't think people realize how significant it can be, how important it is, and how deep it is. So I think there is still an image problem. I think that, but I think also, as you've been saying, there's a huge financial barrier for many people. So difficult for people to get started. I mean, just to have a basic website, set up your insurance, organize a course, hiring venues. all the software you need, etc. Whatever it is that you need to operate before you even think about CPD or anything else in addition that you can pay for, which is very expensive. But it's just very, very difficult for people just to even get started, even if this is their life's calling, and they've got a huge amount to offer. It feels like those opportunities are getting harder and harder to create. Like you say, I mean, some of the training is multiple thousands, and the retreats can also be that much as well. I think those two things stand out for me mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that on your first point. Where this shows up most for me is the misunderstanding that mindfulness is a separate discipline from therapy. It requires entirely different training and supervision and all the rest of it. And this is one of the pushbacks I have for many therapists who are like, oh, just give me a script and then I'll be able to do mindfulness in my practice. Like, no, it doesn't work that way any more than you could give me a script of how to do a therapy session. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so this idea that mindfulness is lesser, that it is subclinical is just nonsense. That's one. And then the second thing is the accessibility piece, and particularly around the disenfranchised people, that when I usually join a secular mindfulness space, most of the people there look like you and me. There is not a great deal of diversity,
Mm,
inclusion,
mhm, mhm,
equity, and access in this field. And I think that's perhaps the biggest challenge that it faces right now is how does it get out of this impression. And again, so much of that is tied to the funding and its background. Is like, how do we have this more accessible to everyone? Because it's a human practice. It's not just an affluent white people practice.
mhm, mhm.
To me, that's the biggest one right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So much work to do, isn't there?
We'll never be bored. We will never
I'll
be
never
bored.
be bored. So from now on, these are the quick fire questions. Do you have a favorite poem, a favorite reading?
Yes, I have two, the guest house and the 5 chapters one where you fall in the hole. That one.
Portia Nelson.
Beyond those, I don't really typically use those in my courses.
Yeah, yeah. Two great ones, though. Who or what is your greatest teacher and why?
My wife, because she calls me on what I need to be called on that I'm not noticing. Because she's brilliant and insightful and she's always around. It's almost like she lives here. So she's able to see the things that happen the most often.
Fabulous. Thank you. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Do you agree?
In that the student's readiness is about their own noticing that teachers are there the whole time. It's not a magical, oh, I'm ready now, and poof, something new shows up. It's like, oh, Bob. Oh, it's Janet. Oh, okay, got it now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good answer. Um, what guidance, if any, would you give to somebody who's considering becoming a mindfulness teacher?
This can be very challenging a thing to do. You've got this. You're already an expert because you're a human being. You already know. And it's turning towards that knowledge again and again and seeing how that lands with them.
Great. And if a student looked back and say at 20 years, what do you think they would say they'd learned from you?
Hopefully, what they have learned is that mindfulness is not just one thing, that there are endless layers to it. And how we choose to engage with that is what can make a tremendous difference, not just in our lives, but in the world around us.
Lovely. I get a sense that we're all your students, all of us in the mindfulness field.
All my teachers, all my teachers. It's just what others have said before me.
No, it's fab. And where can people find out about your work?
So, if people go to mindfulness.voyage, that's the site, and that'll have links to things like LinkedIn, where I'm posting almost every day on a variety of topics and lots of other things there. But that's primarily where you can find everything you need.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ted. I really appreciate having this opportunity to talk to you in depth about this topic. And yeah, it's been hugely fascinating. And I'm sure people will get a lot out of listening to this. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been an honor to be here and really appreciate you having this space and this channel where we can go in depth into things. So thank you so much.